Hey friends, today I'm going to talk a little more about Meghan Markle's With Love Meghan show and her As Ever brand. Specifically, the dried flower sprinkles. Those really bug me as a foodie who likes using edible flowers. Here's the thing, dried flower sprinkles on sandwiches do absolutely nothing but look like dried sprinkles on the sandwich, elevation of aesthetics only. Most dried flowers, once they're dried, don't really retain a lot of specific flavor to them. The herbal stems and stuff usually do, but the actual flower blossom itself generally doesn't retain a lot of flavor once it's dried. There are exceptions, but that's generally the case, especially for the ones that retain a lot of color. They don't tend to have a lot of specific flavor. What they do often have is a very chewy texture that, especially for kids, is going to be weird, especially randomly on a sandwich, which, let's face it, it's going to fall off those sandwiches. Those dried sprinkles are just going to fall off. Anyway, what I really want to talk about is different, actually more creative ways to use edible flowers in cooking, because that's something I actually really enjoy and am passionate about. And the way that Megan did it, dried flower sprinkles just randomly on sandwich bread or whatever, is one of the most uncreative ways possible to use edible flowers in cooking. And also, I want to give credit real quick to Amber from End of the Weeds podcast, because we were discussing Meghan Markle before we did that live on her a while back. And I mentioned how, some of the stuff that she copied could have been done in much more interesting ways. And Amber said she is so uncreative, talking about Megan. And that hit me as just the best description for one of the big problems everyone has with her show. With the platform that she has, the resources that she has, the access that she has, the deal she has with Netflix and all these connections, and plus everyone in the world, almost, some of us know, but a majority of the world would love to work with Princess Diana's daughter-in-law. And that's just the case. So she had an opportunity to, even if she doesn't have it herself, to bring in amazing creativity and present something really unique. And she just didn't. So yeah, when Amber said she's one of the most uncreative individuals imaginable, I'm like, that is the perfect description. And I wanted to give her credit for that, because it's important to give people credit for things that they do, whether or not the thing that they did would be a FOIA request that took hundreds of dollars of their own personal money and time, and that they have very generously given out to other creators. Even though they didn't request credit, it's just the right thing to do. And so even whenever it's something as big as that, or something as small as that, is simply coining a description that I didn't personally think of, I just feel like it's right to give credit. That's all. Anyway, moving on. Since we're talking about edible flowers, I'm wearing my florals today. Seemed apropos. So for one of the first edible flowers I want to talk about, it is redbud blossoms. Redbud, now I know they're purple. Redbud tree was named back in the day, like the same way that red onions are purple and they're called red. So the redbud tree gets these beautiful heart-shaped leaves. They're all over the Ozarks and different places in the South. And the buds, these are full bloomed here in this video, but the buds themselves, before they bloom, sometimes I like to pick them before they bloom and pickle them. You can pickle them, vinegar and salt pickling solution, and it keeps the buds really crisp and gives them like a little bit of a tangy flavor, and they're amazing in salads and look really cool, just sprinkled on the top of salads. They don't add a dry, chewy, why is this even here kind of crunch. They actually complement the taste with the vinegar and everything. So let me show you this little clip of the redbud tree. There's always big bees in them, and it's a big boopy doop, like let me get my bee bud out of the way kind of bees. They're not like attacking you, stinging you, which you'll see here. I'm talking to the bee. I took this in early 2020 when I still lived in St. Louis. I had a really big backyard. Bee, I'm back. He still hasn't looking. Big old bee butt. Everything's so cute. I love the bees. You can hear car sounds because I was in St. Louis, even though I had a really naturey backyard, but there was a interstate nearby. Now, another thing with the red bud flowers, they have kind of like a tart, almost citrusy flavor to them while they're fresh, and they can be cooked in jellies too. Like that's an amazing way to use them, and it looks cool. Like it just looks cool. Let me see if I can find a picture real quick. Okay, let's just take a scroll through this girl's vlog real quick. But look at the jelly from the red buds. Isn't it so cool looking? You'd think it was candles or something. Here, she's picking her blossoms, trying to get pictures. Sustainable self-canning, like that is another thing that would have been good for Megan to actually show. That's a very farm to table thing, is canning. Here she's processing the red buds. And here's our finished product. Isn't it beautiful? So yeah, that's one way. And then she talks a lot about farm to table, which I love. Farm to table is really exciting and important for me, partly because I grew up in the rural Ozarks backwoods in the 80s on dirt roads and stuff. And, everybody was land rich and money cash poor. And farm to table was just our way of life. That was just poor people food. We grew a big garden, not for fun and for the experience, for the food. We canned in the fall to have enough for the winter. We raised a hog and a cow every year and had them locally butchered. Our grandpa did most of the raising, and we all chipped in it and then had it locally butchered. So we always had local raised, local butchered meat, but we weren't trying to be bougie like in the 80s rural Ozarks. This was just poor people ways. Now it's very exciting. It's farm to table. It's trendy, but back then this is just how poor people ate, and we got shamed for it sometimes. So another edible flower that I was surprised didn't get a mention, but I think maybe it's a little bit too humble for Megan, even though constantly we hear from her, it's not about perfection, it's about joy. Well, dandelions are an amazingly nutritious edible flower, not just the flower, the leaves, the roots, like it's all medicine. It's all medicine. I grew up learning all this stuff from my great grandmas. In the Ozark, we foraged, and the older people, the real old people, like my great grandparents, they knew a lot of medicinal knowledge from back in the day when there wasn't a doctor available in that area. You would have had to travel for days to get to a city where a doctor was available. So if you didn't know herbal knowledge and how to forage and prepare and use that stuff the right way, because herbs, just because they're healing doesn't mean they're all safe. You need to know the right way to use them, because what could heal you used the right way can kill you used the wrong way. So, and that might be another reason why Megan didn't want to dive too deep into this. It would have required a little research and knowledge. But let's take a look real quick at the humble dandelion. I'm going to show y'all real quick dandelions in salads. Let's just scroll through real quick all the ways. So you can add the greens in there. Dandelion greens aren't the tastiest, so you usually want to try and mix them up a little bit with tastier greens, but the vitamins in them are well worth it. And also, if you're dedicated to foraging and farm to table type eating, then you're going to want to eat the dandelions. Like it's one of the wonderful ways to use an abundant resource. It's all over our yards instead of trying to poison and dig it up in a way that makes our other edible things in our yards not useful. Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent now because this kind of thing is of a big interest to me and important. Here, someone has torn some of the petals kind of apart to land on there. That looks really pretty. You can also use the full flower bud head. That is edible. And now something I'm not seeing here, let me switch up a little bit to show you another thing we like to do in the Ozarks. It's really tasty. And that is breaded and fried dandelion heads. Oh my God, if y'all have ever had breaded, fried, wild foraged mushrooms, morels, fried dandelion heads have almost a similar taste. I love them, love them. Let's take a scroll through here so y'all see what it looks like. Emmy did an episode on this one time and brought it to, more attention than just us country people that have been doing it for ages. Here's someone showing the process a little more. You want to pick off the stem that, the hollow stem of the dandelion, you can see right there. You want to take that off. That doesn't taste good dried. You want to only get the flower head. And some people take the greenback part off too and like just kind of mush the petal in with a little flour, egg, seasoning, and fry it that way. And that's really good too. It's more like a dandelion ball than a full fried head. However, encouraging people to leave the dandelions in their yard and eat them would really probably disrupt the homeowners association image that she needs in Montecito. So it's not like she can probably have dandelions growing in her yard. That would severely mess up their image. So obviously she can't be showing any real farm to table edible flower foraging stuff. So another flower that's edible is the Japanese honeysuckle, which is invasive. The best thing we could do is be eating it. So that would have been a wonderful thing for her to showcase. But again, that would have required going into a place where invasive species are growing. That wouldn't be a good image. Okay, let's take a scroll through here. This doesn't show them actually being eaten, it just goes over. So if you eat Japanese honeysuckle, it's important to know that the flowers are edible, the berries are not. The berries are poisonous. But as a kid, we had Japanese honeysuckle growing everywhere. And me and my friends, what we would do is so the flower, you can pull out the inside stem of the flower and a drop of nectar comes out the bottom that tastes like honey. We just lay on the field, pick like a whole big pile of these, and just sit there like looking at the sky, eating drops of nectar like country kids in the 80s. We were homeschooled. It's what we had to do. And it was a blast. We absolutely enjoyed it. We were also in a deep religious sect that didn't allow us to go to public schools, and we also weren't allowed to have TVs. So we were outside in nature doing stuff, and that's one aspect of it that was pretty cool, even though we ended up socially stunted in some ways. But hey, we get over it. We all had therapy. So another cool one that would have been very easy and cool for her to show, and it would have showed versatility, it would have showed sustainability and all this stuff, and even given a little cool history lesson. But she didn't, of course, and that is the prickly pear cactus. So this grows in the Ozarks, it grows in Arkansas, and it grows on down further south all the way to Mexico. So let me show y'all the prickly pear. I have this growing myself. I love it. And if weren't having a windstorm today, I'd show you mine. Okay, so this is what the prickly pear cactus looks like. And it gets these little, first it starts as a flower, and then there's all different shades of the flower, as you can see. So they're really beautiful. And then the flower turns into these fruit pods that ripen. You can make jellies out of the fruit pod, makes a really sweet jelly. Also, if you're like in a survival situation, these have sugar and vitamin C in them, so they're really good to eat. And what farmers in Texas do is they take not like a full-on flamethrower, but kind of a flame box type situation that outputs a small flame, and they hit the prickly pear with the flame not long enough to fully burn the plant or anything or roast the juices, but long enough to burn the prickly spines off of them. And then this becomes wonderful food for the cattle, and it's also a lot easier for people to harvest. Now, the flowers of the prickly pear are edible, the petals are edible, and they look beautiful on a dish. And they can also be candied. And like I said, the fruits can be jellied. And then the actual pads themselves are really good, sliced up and fried in a lot of ethnic dishes that come from Latino communities, Mexican communities. I was showed how to cook them from a lady who moved into my neighborhood. And what was really, really cool about this is she didn't speak English and I didn't speak Spanish, but we still like communicated because one day we were both in the backyard. She brings me a plate over the fence and like with hand gestures, communicated. She wanted to give me a plate, and I was able to say thank you. I knew gracias, stuff like that. I was able to communicate a thank you, and we were able to communicate enough with each other to invite each other to our houses and share cooking techniques. She showed me how to cook the prickly pear cactus. It was a wonderful experience. So yeah, even with a language barrier, like if people are friendly and want to connect, you can and learn from each other. Food is a great way to do that. Can y'all tell I'm passionate about food? Growing up in the Ozarks, my grandma made prickly pear jelly because we had a lot of that growing in the fields, and it needed to be harvested right away because the cattle, it would sometimes mess up their feet. If it got too big, the cactus was allowed to get way too big, the spines would get huge. Sometimes the cattle could stumble into them and not realize, and it could really mess up their feet. So keeping the prickly pear harvested was good not only for the livestock, for the animals, but also for us because we made jelly out of it and ate it. Sustenance. So I'm gonna cut this off here because it's getting kind of long, but I could ramble on about edible foraging forever, y'all. Actually, I want to talk about one more thing real quick. It's not really an edible flower, but it's something that grows at my grandparents' place. My great grandparents have a cave on their land, and it has a natural spring that comes out of it. And watercress is an amazing herb, I guess you would call it, vegetaceous herb that only can grow if the water's really, really pure and fresh. So when you see watercress growing, you know that spring water is pure. And watercress is another amazing thing that would have been wonderful to they could have went hiking. I assume it grows in California since the climate is mild enough for it in the Ozarks. I would think California could have it unless maybe it's I don't know if watercress is maybe an herb that can't grow in without a winter period. I don't know. But what it would have been really cool to showcase, the properties of how watercress can only grow in really pure water and then how to cook with it. Let me show y'all some watercress. So this is what watercress looks like after it's harvested. A lot of really high-end restaurants love to offer watercress salad, and people who grow it, commercially or for their own use, like I said, it has to be a really pure water environment. So there's a lot of filtering systems in place for the watercress to grow and be its, full self. But whenever, like my grandparents, when you're lucky enough to have a natural spring of cold water coming out of a cave, really, really pure from deep in the earth, the watercress grows naturally and you get an abundance. That is an amazing thing about their place. Let me see if I can find a picture for y'all of watercress growing out of a spring. Here we go. Look at that watercress. You got rocks and cool, pure, natural water coming straight out of the earth. This is Wisconsin, but that's kind of what it looks like at my grandparents' place in the Ozarks, where the watercress goes, because the water comes up out of the rocks from the natural spring. Here it's grown in a creek, which we see a lot in the Ozarks too. Here it is on a bog. But yeah, anyway, that are some of the really interesting and cool ways that edible flowers could have been used to really teach and show something more unique, something that, goes back to the history of food preservation and how people first began elevating their food, which is supposed to be what our show is all about. Let's elevate it. But I'm sorry, putting dried flour sprinkles on a sandwich that's going to fall off and going to add a weird texture and no flavor if they do stay on is not elevating it. It's only elevating the aesthetic a slight bit. Anyway, I'm going to quit griping about it. I hope maybe y'all learned something about edible flowers that you find interesting. If you did, if you're interested in this, let me know in the comments. Have a good day, y'all.